my guest today is Keisha Dodds. Keisha is a banking consultant at Halifax. She went to Northumbria University in Newcastle. She's got 14 years retail banking experience building strong relationships with customers and other stakeholders. She's known for reducing and helping money worries by making people in Britain prosper and delivering their financial goals for customers and employers. She holds a bachelor's degree in business management and strategy, and she's also a qualified complaints handler and has attained a certificate in retail banking from the IFS. That's a mouthful, but welcome, Keisha Dodds. So how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So I'm super excited that you were able to join us in our series where you can impart your knowledge on our viewers and our audience about the money worries that people have, especially with COVID happening right now. Would you be able to tell us what money worries come to mind in the first instance when you just wake up every day? What sort of inquiries do you get on your desk on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, at the minute, it's all about COVID and people being laid off, people being made redundant. There's not the income coming in as it used to be. It's either being reduced or just totally disappeared. So people are now having to rely on the state for an income or having to use their savings to order to get by, or we find a lot of people slowly starting to get into debt and trying to catch up on the last 6, 7, 8 months that obviously they've had a reprieve from the bank in terms of paying the mortgage, the rent, the loans, the credit cards, everyday things that they were managing all right last year, all of a sudden now are becoming a burden. So we find people are wanting more advice and more help on how to manage their finances.
Yeah. So you've been with Halifax for how long now?
Since 2006, I've been with the Halifax.
Yeah, that's a very long time. So what would you say is the main concern that you have in terms of the challenges, sorry to put it rightly, what are the main challenges that you've been finding in your work daily, but also like, would you say that a challenge, financial worries, is inherent in a certain specific community group, or is that across the board?
I would say it's across the board, because a lot of people you think have got money are actually living in the credit card, living in the overdraft, and they live on this large overdraft, these large credit card balances, just to get by, to keep the lifestyle that they've got, because they've got so many outgoings that their income alone should be enough, but because obviously all the outgoings, the loans, the credit cards, the car payments, they just about get by. And we find with people with lower income, it tends to be more of everyday supplies that they can't get at the minute because their income's been lowered. So I think across the whole board, everybody is struggling at the minute. Everybody.
So what kind of advice would you give then for people? Obviously, one of your fortes is financial literacy and teaching people how to manage their finances. What will be the one major piece of advice? And if more, then feel free to share that. Maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give for people to help them create that healthy relationship with their finances, but also to create that balance. Because to your point, one of the things you just said is overspending and also living beyond their means. So can you elaborate what those solutions look like?
I would definitely say speak to your financial provider first. See what help is there for you as a customer. And they are launching different strategies in place to provide help for customers that are in financial difficulty. You just need to ring up or go in and speak to someone and don't bury your head in the sand. And another thing to do would obviously just have a look at a budget planner, sort of have a look at what's coming in, what's going out. You don't have to itemize it down to the very last cent, but have a grasp of what you earn and a grasp of what you spend so you know what's left. Probably have a spare account so you can have one account for bills and one account for income. So when you get paid, that bills money goes over there. you don't see it, and you know your bills are fine. Anything that's left, it's up to you to do what you want with. So one, budgeting, having an account specifically to pay your bills separate to your income account is an idea. And another thing is to talk to your bank, and they will provide you with this information on how to ensure you're not struggling as you are. If that doesn't help, there are circumstances where the banks can freeze interest, they can give you payment holidays, they can put a lot of things in place. At the minute, most of the banks are giving up to 6 months payment holiday, and a lot of the loan products and mortgages and credit cards. So I would say speak to your bank, definitely.
I like that. And also to one point that you made, which resonates with me with regards to opening a bill specific account, which is what we have. My husband and I have a joint account, which is where we both put our responsible shares into for paying bills. And then we've got both separate accounts for our personal spending of whatever is left. So I really like that idea, and it's a very handy tool to have. I really believe in that, and I believe that it really works. So thank you so much for sharing that with our viewers. And I do know that in the past, when we had our discovery call, our informal chat, we talked about the fact that there is a lack of retail mortgage retail facilities for people that live in the diaspora. And I went on to tell you that that's one of my pet peeves, because as a person who immigrated from Africa and is now living in the UK, I find it really frustrating that I cannot be able to build or borrow money for constructing or buying a house back home in Zambia. What would your comment be about that? And where is maybe Halifax, or your personal experience, where is the banking industry in general when it comes to providing cross-border mortgage facilities for people like myself living in the diaspora?
Yeah, it's very limited at the minute. I think it's all to do with GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. I mean, some European countries don't want to share information with, countries outside of the European Union. They don't know how the customers' data is going to be protected. And I mean, if there could be a way in which this was alleviated, I'm sure there could be a link in which you could live in one country and, your bank could speak to another bank in another country and create a link whereby they know what you earn, they know how much money you can afford to pay for a mortgage. And then obviously the receiving country could then obviously give you a mortgage based on what the other country says. And I think a lot of the credit people, the people that provide credit, like Experian, Equifax, Call Credit, the system's already in place here in the UK and in Europe, but I'm not sure how far the link goes in terms of Africa. But that could be an idea for the African banks to liaise with the UK banks via, Equifax, Call Credit, to say, yes, for instance, Jennifer does work, she does earn this, she can afford that. Use this information to then provide her with a mortgage, based on the fact that we've provided this information for you. It could work, but I guess it would just have to be that both banks coming together. I know HSBC does it. They do it in Singapore, and they do it in the Asian subcontinent. And that would have to be a strategy that we could look into to see how they're doing it, because obviously Asian customers can purchase properties in Asia via living in the UK. So it can be done.
Amazing. So it's just a matter of removing those barriers and creating that synergy between the banks and the credit companies. That's very good and useful insight. Thank you so much for that, Keisha. But also, I would like, on a personal note, I would like to know a little bit about you. So you've got this amazing accent, which I love. Tell me a little bit more about Keisha. Who is Keisha Dodds, and how did you come to be working at Halifax? How I know that you went to Northumbria University. Tell me a little bit more about your career trajectory so far, and how you ended up being a consultant at Halifax.
All right. Well, I'm from the Caribbean, Jamaica to be specific. And I met my now husband in the Cayman Islands, which is the island just above Jamaica. It used to be part of Jamaica. Then Jamaica decided to leave the British Union, and hence Cayman Islands was still there. So anyway, rolled back 2003, came here, started my degree in Northumbria University, got married, was doing a little job in an electrical store called Curry's PC World, you know, Curry's?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And customer services, yes, bringing in people bringing in Hoovers, washing machines, loved it. But I
I
thought,
think I got my laptop from there.
yes, yes, I used to be able to book in laptops, and the funniest bit for me was people bringing in Hoovers that were full to the brim with dust and saying, the Hoover's not working on me. Have you thought about emptying it? So I had a great time at Curry's, a great fun, and I thought I needed a career now. So I was doing my degree part-time, self-funding, and I applied for a job with the Halifax at the call centre first, and got that, and I thought I want to move into branch because the call centre was just inboxing. I was just sleeping at my desk like that. I'm a people person. So I had to transfer into the branch, which is what I did in 2006. I was with the bank before as an agent, a contractor, but not a full-time staff. So I started as a cashier and then worked my way up to a bank consultant in 2008. And then been doing that job ever since 2008. So I had my degree, still doing the same job as I had before my degree. So somehow it just sort of stayed there. I had adopted two lovely girls, and we are just sort of living in the northeast of England as a family unit up here during lockdown.
Amazing. Yes. Oh my gosh, you're a woman after my own heart. I want to hear more about your adopted kids. Tell me more about those kids. So how did that come to be?
Come about? Well, we've got, we've been just looking. I thought, I've got endometriosis, which is quite debilitating. And, you know, after a while, and I thought, right, let's just adopt some kids. There must be some kids out there that, you know, want a loving home, and I'm sure we could provide a loving home for them. So that's what we did. And they're 8 and 7 and 8, and they're both in full-time school. Yes, they love TikTok and Roblox and drawings and the usual things. Scream, get out of the house!
Yeah.
Amazing. The usual things. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that personal slice of your life. That's amazing, because I like to feel like most people will talk about their work, but, you know, they don't talk about their personal life. And then it's really good to know the person behind those brains as a human being. So thank you for sharing that. I know that was a little bit off the charts. So so coming back to your work at Halifax, which is an amazing role that you're playing in the community, obviously helping and educating people about their financial worries and helping them get out of those ruts, so to speak, for lack of a better expression. So what would be probably the advice that you would give maybe a young person who's just graduated? They don't even know what a budget is. They've never even they're probably even working in their very first job. So I believe that it's always easier to teach someone who hasn't yet developed bad habits to be on the right path than for somebody who's already been in a wrong path to course correct. So what sort of advice would you give young people perhaps listening to this program in terms of their financial health?
I would just say a lot of times it gets just so difficult for people to understand rates and interest. And I would just say, put that at the back of your mind. Think about it as a plus and minus situation. You've got some money, you use some money, there isn't any money left, so you can't use any more money. Think of it like that. And you have that, and then you get a bank account, it's electronic, you have some money, you spend some money, there's zero left, don't use any more, there's none left. Try and save some of that money. Get online banking. You can check your app, see what's in your bank balance before you spend it, and get into the habit of checking before you spend, and knowing that if you can't afford something, you know, you've got to either save up for it or have a meaningful way of paying it back. Because a lot of times people take something out of credit, don't pay it back, and they think, oh, I'm not paying that. And then it's on your credit file for 6 years. It does affect you. It does affect what you do. Every bill, a water bill, be it a mobile phone bill, they're all watching. Try and get advice or help from your bank if you can. Read up about bank accounts. There's loads of information out there if you want. It may sound boring, but if you want to be sensible, plus, minus, you haven't got it, don't spend it. That's it.
Mhm. I like that. I like that a lot because you can't spend what you don't have.
That's
So
right.
yeah, which brings me when you talk about getting advice from customer service from your bank and stuff like that. For me, I think that the fact that a lot of retail banking has disappeared from the high street, and I
Right.
feel like that has made people out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. They've
Yep.
forgotten what it's like to have a bank, and maybe even especially the young people who actually are graduating now and they've actually never even seen a high street bank. How have the banks have adapted to being online and to being still making themselves visible and available to their customers without necessarily being in a bricks and mortar place on the high street?
Yes, there are loads of tools that the banks have established. They're on their website. You would have to go looking. They could do with possibly making it a bit more out there so younger people can see that, look, this is what we've got. Look at this. Instead, you've got to go scrolling through. Go, oh, how do I do this? So they could improve on that significantly. But there are topics such as money worries, budgeting, how bank accounts work. There are loads of YouTube, especially Barclays
Hmm.
does a lot of YouTube adverts on spending advice, getting information about banks. There's loads of banking apps as well out there that teaches you how money works. So
Okay.
there is a lot of banks, and I think most of the main UK banks are encouraging people now to go online. So once you're there, there's loads of little pop-up ads that sort of help you manage. There's little tools and little sort of schedules that you can manage and things like that. Timers that count down when you get paid and what's left after all your bills have come out. So there's loads of tools available. You just have to sort of look for them.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's on one hand where banks give you advice and tools and educate you about managing loans. But on the other hand, as we know from the credit crunch of 2008, 2009, banks are also being blamed for having lent too much money into the community, into they put too much money into the real estate place. And with COVID right now, we are also on the brink of another financial crunch. What would you say banks are doing at the moment to help people avoid those same pitfalls of over borrowing and the banks and overspending as well in terms of borrowing credit cards, living beyond their means, because maybe banks were very enabling in giving people that didn't deserve to get credit cards, they still gave them credit cards. People that didn't deserve to buy homes, they still gave them mortgages. How are banks, in your opinion, making sure that there's no repetition of this type of irresponsible predatory lending on their
Yeah.
part?
A lot of the time what the banks have started doing is, apart from the mortgage advice, they've started recording their interviews. So, the customer can, listen back if they want to know what was said to them. A lot of the banks don't give advice now. It's more information based. So we'll present you with the information based on what you've told us about your income, your outgoings, and then it's up to you to make a decision whether or not that's right for you. Whereas before, it could have been seen as leaning more towards an advice where customers were, look, trust in the bank, get the advice from the bank. And a lot of the times there was a lot of monetary rewards in it for the bank staff. So they were getting bonuses for getting the products, getting the mortgages, getting the credit cards. So it may not have been the best in the customer's best interest at the time. So they've stopped that now. There's no monetary rewards for getting 5, 6 credit cards a day, whereas back in the past it was that. So that sort of stopped the bank team from obviously lending unnecessarily. And the mortgage side of things, again, that's recorded, but it's a lot more stricter. You need everything. They need to know exactly how much you pay for a haircut. They need to know exactly how much you pay for your prescription, and it goes through the fine fine tooth comb. And if you said to them in 2 years you won't be able to afford, or you won't be able as much income, they're going to use the lower income that's been projected for, the 2 years. They'll not keep using the income now. So again, they need to make sure that you can afford the mortgage based on your income in 2 years' time. So there's a lot more stricter procedures in place to get a mortgage. And we work closely with the credit facilities just to see exactly what you've got on your credit file. Is it affordable? And if it isn't, then we straight out say no. It's not affordable. You need to do a bit more saving. You need to do a little bit more paying off some other debts, because we don't want you to have 5 or 6 car loans and think you can get a mortgage and you think which one you're going to pay off. So it's a risk to us. So we always make sure your debts are manageable before we think about lending you anything.
Right. Okay. That's good to know that they're no longer predatory lenders. Now they're more of responsible lenders. But which brings me to the topic, when I've just been listening to your response, it brings me to the topic of, yes, the restrictions on mortgages are there. They're being implemented. However, I also feel as a consumer looking in, a potential consumer looking in, for instance, I mentioned the fact that I'm first generation living in the UK. That means I don't have a history of living and working in this country, except for the 10 years that I've lived and worked in this country. And so there would be people like myself out there who are in this position where they're already in their mid age group. They're already in their 50s perhaps, and they've never owned a property before here in the UK. But it's really difficult to get on the property ladder for people who have already spent what would have been 25 years of their life paying off a mortgage, and they're already have nothing left. What sort of advice would you give people that are just still new living in the UK? They've probably immigrated from other countries and they're trying to get on the property ladder at a later stage than normal, which I believe normal would be 30 years of age. Not that there's any age restriction, but in terms historically, it seems like a lot of people tend to buy their first homes between 30 and 35 years old. What sort of advice would you give for people that are just beginning to think of getting on those ladders in the UK?
Again, I would say, speak to a mortgage advisor. Sometimes they're free. Again, your bank normally has mortgage providers available. Telephone, call up. A lot of the times, the restrictions on age have been lifted for most banks. Most banks can lend now into your 80s. Not that you want a mortgage then.
Yeah.
They do. And a lot of banks are doing this thing where your family can, put the deposit down and they get interest on that deposit. So you don't really have to have a deposit depending on your age group. So there's loads and loads of things that the banks are doing. Barclays are doing quite a lot of things where your family lend you the money, they get it back after a certain time. And I know the Halifax is doing something similar. For young people, I would just say get some advice. Don't just sort of listen to your friends and go, you can't get a mortgage, you need this, you need that. Get the facts, get some advice. Go into a high street, estate agent, and ask for some information. There is the Money Advice website, MA it's called. That's quite a good web page. I don't know for the UK, I'm not sure what it is like in Africa, but the MA website gives you information and advice on everything from mortgages all the way down to money worries. So that's a good website to look at how to get mortgages. In the UK, first of all, you would need what we call an agreement in principle. So this enables you to find out exactly how much the banks can lend you and what deposit you have to put down. And that's specific to you. And that piece of document will then enable you to see, actually, look, I need to save 10%. I only have 4. This is going to take me another year. Then you'll know from then on how much you need to save and what pace you need to save at. That document, I think, is crucial in finding out what you can borrow, how much you can borrow as well. So that would be the first thing. And once, obviously, you put an offer in on the property, then you go back and get the mortgage application. And I think a lot of the times the urban areas are hard to get on the mortgage ladder. You may want to look out in the country, maybe look around the country if you want to settle somewhere else. A lot of the time there are cheaper properties around the country rather than just where you live. So you got to have an open mind about where you want to live. Or use your head, not your heart
Yeah,
sometimes.
that actually brings me to the conversation we had prior to recording this show. We talked about towns outside London tend to have cheaper properties, but the question being that it's harder to find employment in those areas as well. So how does one balance having a lower income versus moving to the countryside, perhaps to your point, where the properties are cheaper? How, what sort of equilibrium can somebody find in terms of balancing that out?
Yeah, there's two ways to think about it. I mean, one, with the current situation, most people are working from home. So if you were to move out another area, it wouldn't affect you because you're still working for the same company, or you would. In the next 2 or 3 years, people are going to be working from home anyway, maybe going in the office 1 day a week. So you could use that as a great time now to move, because you're not going in the office, you're not commuting, and your income will probably stretch a lot more in a more like a northerly town or a more rural town. You may not have all the the benefits of like Uber Eats and stuff, but there are other things available.
You at least have organic food.
Yes, you can maybe live near a farm. You can just go next door and pick up your milk. Have like a quite a lifestyle, a healthier lifestyle by moving out. That could be one way of putting it. The next thing I would say is, even if you move out of the big cities and the pay isn't as high, but bear in mind the mortgage won't be as high either. So everything's relative. So, you're used to a bigger pay, but then in the London areas, you'd have to pay a bigger mortgage. And just think, you're going to get a garden, a front garden and a back garden, possibly. You probably hear birds and things like that. So it's, what do you give up for a quality of life that you want for you and your kids? How can you manage that? And I think, open your mind up, look online, see what properties are around, see what your budget is, get your agreement in principles, see how far you can stretch, and make the decision for you to live a better life. Because London, even though it's lovely, it's not all it's made out to be, is it?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and
very
it's the
hard to get.
epicenter of COVID right now. So,
Yeah, yes, it is.
and
So working from home, you have your laptop. You don't need to be in the office, so you can live anywhere in the world. In fact, the Cayman Islands are
absolutely.
offering people to go and live there right now, working from home. Or
Mm,
you can just say, look, I don't need that much pay because I've got a better quality of life,
yeah.
and my kids are happy. If you don't have kids, you're happier. So look at it that
Mhm.
way.
I really like that. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Which brings me to a point. Last night, I was literally watching a program in Cornwall where, it brings me to the topic of these investment properties. So the people in London, in big cities, are also taking over the countryside, especially the West Country. They're building their holiday homes there, which is making that market unaffordable for the locals as well. So how do you balance? So I dare to argue with you that it's actually not as simplistic as that, because these same areas now, which were known to be countryside and havens for people who are fed up of the city and or cannot afford to live in the city, to move to and be able to afford to get on the country on the property ladder, now it's become prohibitive because the big city people are buying those properties, so they are pushing the property prices and values much higher. So much so that even local people cannot afford. In one instance, we watched this woman who's literally living in a ramshack outside a mansion, literally just across the street. She's living in a shed, and she's lived in that shed for 14 years just because she can't even afford the properties that are within her own street, because all those properties are left empty throughout the year. They're only occupied during the summer when the people from the cities move there to have their holidays. Throughout the year, they're empty, and she can't even afford to live in a one-bedroom flat. How are banks looking at those things, and how you as a banking consultant, are you aware of these things, and how is the industry working perhaps with the government to come up with some policies that will help, first and foremost, reduce this line of inequality, but also reduce this waste of people buying investment properties that are just sitting there when there's other people that are literally sleeping on the streets in London and all in within the countryside.
Well, I think the first point I made before was people moving permanently. A lot of the time, the problem arises now is the holiday homes, and a lot of the times banks don't really lend for holiday homes. It tends to be self-funded, tends to be super rich people. So maybe that's out of the bank's control. It may be something the local council wants to deal with, or the solicitors coming up with a solution where the banning the sale of second homes in certain areas, because you got to remember they do have still their main residence still in London, so they are only moving in these areas for a holiday, which I think is wrong, because obviously locals can't then afford those properties. But banks mainly lend for main residences or buy-to-lets. They don't tend to lend for holiday homes.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be a loan. And then obviously once you've got the money, then you can just do what you want. But most of these homes are self-funded. So rich people have their own money, just go, and there you go, there's $500,000, I'll build this house down here. So we don't really have much to do with those type of things. It needs to be probably more regulations for the local council and the local authority to look into, to put strategies in place to lower the surge of holiday homes by investors and people living in the inner city of the main bits of London. Yeah,
that's a fair response. But for me, I was looking at it from a stakeholder point of view, because banks are a major stakeholder in the communities that they serve. So we've got these underserved people in the community that would normally go to the bank to borrow their money for their first homes, like you rightfully put it. And then we've got, like you said, people who have disposable income, they're self-funding and buying these properties. That's another piece of the puzzle. And then we've got councils, local councils, that are responsible for the residential areas in which these properties are being bought. And then we've got real estate agents and lawyers and other conveyors that are involved. So I feel like it would be ideal to bring all the stakeholders on the table to have these discussions. And I feel like the banks can take the lead in this, especially the mortgage department, can take the lead, because it's in their best interest to spread this wealth with the people that they're actually serving, the people that they have nots that they're serving. In the same instance, they're also probably even reaching out, or they have a connection somehow to the people that are banking with them. They may not be using that, they may not be privy to the information that person is going to buy a property, but because they're a client, the banks are privy to the information that this person has just spent an XY amount of money. Obviously, surely that money is being spent on an investment property. Not that I'm saying and encouraging the bank to be spying on their clients' bank activities, but it's obvious when somebody pays for a property to come out of their bank account, because nobody pays cash for their property, especially a purchase which is worth 1.5 million. So there'll be a paper trail that goes through their bank account, which is indicating that they're purchasing a second property or an investment property. So my take on this, or my suggestion, is that the bank works with all these other stakeholders in putting caveats and monitoring situations, policy reforms that will help this irresponsible kind of spending within the community. Because everybody will say, oh yeah, it's just you poor people hating on rich people. But when you hear stories like somebody living in a shed across a mansion, which is paid for, yes, by somebody's own out-of-pocket money, which is not borrowed from the bank, but it's just these disparities that as a society, and the bank being a major stakeholder in the community, we have a responsibility to do something about it and start having these conversations such as we are having, to perhaps start dealing with these situations. What do you say to that? Or from a personal perspective?
Yeah, there are areas in the UK, in the north, where the prices can't supersede a set amount, and that's to stop investors coming in. So there are areas, and they've been put in by local councils and local laws. So it's something that can be done. But a lot of the time, local councils are greedy. They want the investment, they want the money, So it's sort of everybody's wanting what they want. I mean, the council in particular is in South Yorkshire. You cannot purchase a property for more than a set amount. That is law. So if you try and buy a property you cannot go, and you cannot sell your property for more than a set amount as well. And then that just keeps locals in the area, and it has proven to have worked. It's in Doncaster. There's a place in Doncaster where they can't do that. So it can be done. There can be caveats in place to, stop. The land registry can get involved as well. So all these people can get involved.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, they think it may be something civil. If you want to buy a house, it's a free country. You buy a house, you buy what you want. But the laws of the land should jump in, because the banks aren't going to interfere. Because obviously, bank transfer, as long as the money is legal, it's not being money laundered, they don't really care what you spend your money on. As long as it's a legal transfer, legal, property purchase, they're not going to intervene.
Yeah.
But what needs to be is the laws of the land that need to come in play, and subject the banks to regulations, or subject the solicitors to regulations that will then prevent consumers doing these sort of things, because it can be done. It's just laws that need to come in place. So, the local councils, the people need to pressure the councillors to input these or put this in place in front of judges. It's going to be a long process, but it can be done.
Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's very insightful, because it just breaks my heart to see people especially Cornwall. This particular program was on Cornwall. People literally living in caravans because they can't afford the very land that they serve, because it's such a tourist led industry where, they only have 4 months in a year to earn income. And that income is not enough for them to actually get on the property ladder. So in the end, the rest of the year, they live in caravans. And then they're serving people coming from the big cities living in their mansions. I mean, It's just like so lopsided. What is wrong with that picture? So I hope that people from Cornwall, I invite people from Cornwall to watch this program, and that they can learn and start advocating for that balance of power in the property industry to start happening, and lobbying for certain laws to be put in place. So thank you so much for that that insight, very useful information. So to wind our program, it's been such an amazing time chatting to you, Keisha. Just to wind off, is there any last pieces of advice that you could give to people going into 2021 with their money worries? Maybe they're thinking of buying a property, or any other sort of financial wisdom that you can impart on our viewers before we let you go?
I would just say, speak to people. That's always the main thing, is to speak to someone. If you're worried about your money, there's loads of signposts out there. So you've got Mind, the mental health charity. If you're worried about gambling, there's also Gambam. There's so many different public organizations out there willing to help, and they go the same for the mortgages as well. Just go online, type in, how do I get a mortgage? Where do I start? And the information is just going to come flowing in. But you can look at legal websites, so or look at your bank websites, and first and foremost, talk to your family, talk to your parents. Can they lend you some money? If not, how can you save? Get a budget planner, see how much you earn, how much you have coming in, and try and make a conscious effort to improve your financial literacy, and improve your mental well-being. And going forward, just sort of think of this time as a time to reflect, and think about how you can then challenge and channel that energy that you've got to, better support your life, and better, support those around you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Keisha. It's been so amazing and insightful talking to you today.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, and you have a good day.
Bye-bye.